The examination room on Zenith Prime Station was cold and sterile. Claire Mason sat in the metal chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She had been waiting for nearly an hour while the Arxian examiner, Velthar, reviewed her species' biological data on his floating screens. The alien's 6 fingers moved quickly across the holographic displays, and Claire could see his mouth parts twisting into what she had learned was the Arxian equivalent of a smile. Velthar looked at the human woman with barely concealed amusement. According to the data Earth had submitted with their application to join the Galactic Council, humans were laughably fragile. Their bone density was comparable to the weakest avian species in the galaxy. Their muscle fiber efficiency rated at half the baseline standard that most spacefaring civilizations possessed. They had no natural armor plating protecting their vital organs. No venomous defense systems, no psionic abilities, no reinforced exoskeleton. They were soft, squishy creatures who somehow managed to build starships despite their obvious physical limitations. Lieutenant Mason, Velthar said in heavily accented English, his translator Chip struggling with the pronunciation, "We will now begin the standard compatibility assessment. This will determine which labor categories your species qualifies for within the Council's employment structure." Claire nodded politely. She was 28 years old, selected for this diplomatic mission because of her dual background in marine biology and military service. The Council didn't know about her 2 tours with Earth's Special Operations Forces. They had only seen her scientific credentials and calm demeanor during the initial meetings. Earth's government had decided it was better to let the aliens underestimate humans, at least at first. "Please place your arm in the neural interface," Velthar instructed, gesturing to a mechanical device that extended from the wall. Claire did as requested. The machine wrapped around her forearm with a soft humming sound. She felt a slight tingling sensation as it connected to her nervous system. "We will begin with a pain threshold evaluation," Velthar explained, tapping commands into his console. "This is standard procedure for all new species. It helps us understand your physiological limitations and ensures we do not assign you to tasks that would cause undue suffering." "That sounds reasonable," Claire said. She had been briefed about these tests before leaving Earth. Her superiors had told her to answer honestly and not try to show off. "Just be yourself," they had said. "Let them draw their own conclusions." Velthar activated the neural stimulator at level 3. This was the setting used for most species during their initial evaluation. It produced a sensation that most beings found uncomfortable, but not unbearable, a good baseline for measuring tolerance. Claire sat perfectly still. She waited for something to happen. After a few seconds, she glanced at the monitor displaying her neural readings. "Is it on?" she asked. Velthar's eyes widened slightly. He checked his instruments, certain there must be a malfunction. The device was clearly active. The power flow was normal. The neural connection was established, but the human showed no signs of distress. Her heart rate hadn't increased. Her breathing remained steady. Her facial expression hadn't changed. "The device is functioning correctly," Velthar said slowly. He increased the setting to level 5, which should produce noticeable discomfort in any registered species.
"Can you feel this?"
Claire tilted her head slightly. "I feel something, kind of like a mild electric tingle. Is that what it's supposed to do?" The Arxian examiner felt a flutter of uncertainty in his primary stomach. He increased the power to level 7. At this setting, most species would be experiencing significant pain. Some would be requesting the test to stop. The human's vital signs showed a slight elevation in heart rate, but nothing concerning. She looked mildly curious, nothing more. "How would you describe the sensation now?" Velthar asked, his voice carefully controlled. Claire considered for a moment. "It's a bit stronger, kind of like when your leg falls asleep and then the blood starts flowing back. Tingly and slightly annoying, but not painful. Should it hurt?" Velthar didn't answer immediately. He stared at his instruments, then at the human, then back at his instruments. He increased the setting to level 9. This was well beyond the normal testing range. At this level, the device was designed to simulate serious injury pain. It was used only in medical research, never in routine evaluations. Claire's breathing became slightly heavier. She shifted in her seat. "Okay, now I definitely feel that. It's uncomfortable, like a bad muscle cramp, but I've had worse during training exercises back home." The examiner's hands trembled slightly as he shut down the device. This was impossible. Either his equipment was catastrophically malfunctioned, or this species was far more resilient than their biological data suggested. He needed to consult with senior staff immediately. "We will take a short break," Velthar announced, trying to keep his voice professional. "Please remain here. I need to verify the calibration of the testing equipment." Claire nodded and leaned back in the chair. She pulled out a small data pad from her jacket pocket and began reading a novel she had downloaded before the journey. It was a mystery thriller set in old Earth's 20th century. She had always enjoyed detective stories. 30 minutes later, Velthar returned with Senior Examiner Kixtal, a towering Krellian who stood nearly 3 meters tall. Kixtal had personally evaluated over 300 species during his 40-year career with the Council. He had seen everything from silicon-based crystalline entities to methane-breathing hive minds. He was certain that this situation was simply a case of faulty equipment or examiner error. "Lieutenant Mason," Kixtal said in a deep, rumbling voice that vibrated through the floor, "I apologize for the delay. We are going to run a more comprehensive series of evaluations to ensure accurate results. Your comfort and safety are our primary concerns." Claire set down her datapad and smiled. "No problem. I'm here to help however I can." Kixtal had brought portable equipment from the primary research lab. He wanted to eliminate any possibility of calibration issues with the room's built-in systems. He set up a fresh neural stimulator, a temperature variance chamber, a pressure modulation system, and a gravitational field generator. These were the standard tools for evaluating species compatibility with various galactic environments. They began again with the pain threshold test. Using Kixtal's personal equipment that he knew was perfectly calibrated, the results were identical to Velthar's findings. The human barely reacted to stimuli that should have been excruciating. Next came the temperature test. Most species had a comfortable range of about 15 degrees. Outside that range, they experienced increasing distress. Kixtal started at what should be a pleasant temperature for a species from a temperate world like Earth. Claire sat calmly as the temperature in the chamber dropped to near freezing. "Getting chilly," she commented. "Do you have a blanket?" Then the temperature rose to levels that made Velthar uncomfortable, just standing outside the chamber. Claire's face became flushed and she was clearly sweating, but she remained conscious and alert. "This is pretty hot," she said. "Reminds me of summer in Arizona. That's a desert region back home." Kixtal and Velthar exchanged glances. Something was very wrong with their understanding of this species. The pressure chamber was next on Kixtal's list of evaluation tests. This device simulated different atmospheric conditions, allowing examiners to determine which planetary environments a species could tolerate. Most beings had a relatively narrow range of acceptable pressure levels. Too low and their blood would begin to boil. Too high and their cellular structure would start to compress and fail. Claire stepped into the transparent chamber and gave a thumbs up, a human gesture that the examiners had learned meant readiness or approval. Kixtal began with standard pressure, then gradually increased it. He watched the human carefully through the chamber walls, ready to abort the test at the first sign of distress. At 1.5 times standard pressure, most species would be experiencing difficulty breathing and potential internal organ stress. Claire stood normally, looking around the chamber with mild interest. At 2 times standard pressure, the Arxian Velthar would have been unconscious. Claire rolled her shoulders and stretched her neck from side to side. "How do you feel?" Kixtal asked through the communication system. "Fine," Claire replied. "The air feels thicker, like breathing through a cloth, but it's manageable. My ears popped a few times during the increase. That was a bit annoying." Kixtal pushed the pressure higher, 2.5 times standard, 3 times standard. At this level, he was approaching the limits of what the chamber was designed to safely produce. The structural integrity warnings were starting to flash on his console, but the human continued to breathe steadily. "This is definitely harder," Claire admitted. "I can feel the pressure on my chest. But I've experienced worse during deep-water diving training. We have recreational activities on Earth where people go underwater in our oceans, sometimes to depths that produce similar pressure levels. Some of our military personnel train at even greater depths." The Krellian examiner shook his massive head in disbelief. He reduced the pressure back to normal and opened the chamber. Claire stepped out, took a few deep breaths of regular station air, and smiled. "What's next?" What came next was the gravitational field test, and this was where Kixtal expected to finally see the human's limitations. Gravity was the great equalizer. It didn't matter how tough your skin was or how well you tolerated temperature changes. If you couldn't support your own body weight under increased gravitational pull, you simply couldn't function. The gravity chamber was a large circular room with padded floors and walls. Safety sensors lined every surface, ready to shut down the field generators if the test subject showed signs of dangerous distress. Claire walked to the center of the room and waited for instructions. "We will start at 1.2 times standard gravity," Kickstal announced. "Please inform us immediately if you experience any discomfort or difficulty." The field generators hummed to life. Claire felt the familiar sensation of increased weight. It was like wearing a heavy backpack, but distributed across her entire body. She shifted her stance slightly to compensate and gave another thumbs up. Kickstal increased the field gradually, 1.5 times standard. Claire walked around the chamber, testing her mobility. Her movements were slower and required more effort, but she showed no signs of system failure. At 1.8 times standard, most bipedal species would be struggling to remain upright. Claire was breathing harder now, and a light sheen of sweat had formed on her forehead. But she continued to move. She bent down and touched her toes, demonstrating her flexibility was still functional. She did a few jumping movements, though they were clearly more difficult than normal. "Increase to 2.0, Kickstal said to Velthar, who was monitoring the control systems. Velthar hesitated. "Are you certain? That level has caused bone fractures in some species." "Increase to 2.0, Kickstal repeated. The gravity field intensified. Claire's knees bent slightly under the additional weight, and her breathing became noticeably labored. But she remained standing. More than that, she began to do exercises. She dropped to the padded floor and performed push-ups, lifting her body weight against twice the normal gravitational pull. Her form was imperfect and the movements were slow, but she completed 10 repetitions before standing again. "Earth's gravity is approximately 1.1 times galactic standard," Claire explained between heavy breaths. "So this is about 1.8 times what I'm used to. We have training facilities back home that simulate higher gravity for military and athletic conditioning. I've trained at 2.2 times Earth normal, which would be about 2.4 times your standard. This is difficult, but well within my experience range." Kickstal increased the field to 2.5 times standard. Claire visibly struggled now. Her legs were shaking from the effort of supporting her weight. Her breathing was hard and fast, but she didn't collapse. She didn't call for the test to stop. She stood there, fighting against the crushing force, and remained conscious and coherent. "Enough," Kickstal said, shutting down the field. He was disturbed by what he was witnessing. This was not what the biological data had predicted. "Lieutenant Mason, please exit the chamber and rest. We need to discuss these results." Claire walked out of the gravity chamber on slightly unsteady legs. She sat down on a bench and drank water from a container she had brought with her. Her heart rate was elevated and she was clearly tired, but she recovered quickly. Within 5 minutes, her vital signs had returned to normal resting levels. The two examiners stepped away to confer in private. Velthar spoke first, his voice filled with confusion. "The equipment is functioning perfectly. I have triple-checked every system. The results are accurate." "Then our initial classification of this species is fundamentally wrong," Kickstal said. "Their biological data suggested they were fragile, suitable only for low-stress research and administrative roles. But this individual has demonstrated resilience far beyond what their muscle density and bone structure should allow." "Perhaps she is an exceptional specimen," Velthar suggested, "an outlier among her kind. Some species have rare individuals with unusual capabilities." Kickstal considered this. "That is possible, but unlikely. Earth would not send an exceptional individual for standard evaluation. They would send someone representative of their average population. If this is what an average human can endure, then we need to completely reassess our understanding of their species." A new voice joined the conversation. Councilmember Zareth had been observing the tests remotely and had decided to visit the examination center in person. The Solvian diplomat was known for his thorough approach to new species evaluation. "Gentlemen, I have been watching your assessment with great interest. I believe we are approaching this from the wrong angle." The two examiners turned to face the council member. Zareth continued, his crystalline eyes reflecting the laboratory lights. "You are testing this human's ability to withstand controlled, measured stress. But the question we should be asking is different. We should be asking how this species performs when facing actual danger. Laboratory tests are useful, but they do not replicate real conditions. What do you propose? Kickstall asked. A combat evaluation, Zareth said simply. The galaxy is not a peaceful place. Any species seeking council membership must demonstrate they can defend themselves and contribute to mutual security. Let us see how this supposedly fragile human performs in a combat scenario. Felthar looked nervous. That could be dangerous. If she is injured, then we will have our answer about human durability, Zareth interrupted. And we will provide immediate medical care. But I suspect this human is more resilient than you fear. In fact, I am willing to wager she will surprise us once again. The council member approached Claire, who had finished her water and was reading her datapad again. Lieutenant Mason, would you be willing to participate in a combat simulation? It would help us better understand your species' capabilities. Claire looked up from her book and smiled. Sure, I'd be happy to. What kind of combat simulation are we talking about? The combat training facility on Zenith Prime Station was designed to accommodate various species and fighting styles. The main arena was a large circular space with adjustable gravity, atmospheric controls, and terrain modification capabilities. Observation galleries surrounded the arena, already filling with curious council members and staff who had heard about the unusual human undergoing evaluation. Claire stood in the preparation room, being fitted with standard protective gear. The armor was lightweight and designed to prevent fatal injuries while still allowing realistic combat feedback. She had been given a choice of weapons from the Galactic Standard Arsenal, but she had politely declined, saying she wanted to start with unarmed combat to get a feel for the simulation. The combat drone being prepared for her was a sophisticated machine programmed with fighting techniques from 12 different warrior species. It could adjust its strength, speed, and tactics based on the opponent it faced. For Claire's test, the drone had been configured to match Throk combat specifications at 60% power output. Even at reduced capacity, a Throk fighter was formidable, using overwhelming strength and aggression to dominate opponents. Kickstall spoke to Claire through the communication system. The simulation will begin when you enter the arena. The drone will attack using Throk battle tactics. You may request a stop at any time by raising both hands above your head. Do you understand? I understand, Claire confirmed. She stretched her arms and rolled her neck, loosening up her muscles. Ready when you are. The door to the arena opened and Claire walked onto the sandy floor. The combat drone stood at the opposite end, a humanoid machine roughly 2.5 meters tall. Its metal frame was painted in dark colors and its optical sensors glowed red. As soon as Claire reached the center of the arena, the drone charged. The Throk fighting style was brutal and direct. The drone came at Claire like a battering ram, its heavy arm drawn back for a devastating punch. This was the moment most observers expected to see the human panic or attempt to flee. Instead, Claire did something unexpected. She moved toward the attack. At the last possible moment, Claire sidestepped the punch and used the drone's own momentum against it. She grabbed its extended arm, placed her hip against its center of mass, and executed a perfect throwing technique. The drone crashed to the sandy floor with a heavy thud. The observers in the gallery gasped. The drone recovered quickly as programmed and attacked again. This time it attempted a grappling move, trying to use its superior strength to crush the human. Claire didn't fight against the grip. Instead, she found a weak point in the hold and twisted her body in a way that created leverage. She freed herself and struck the drone's knee joint with a precise kick that forced it to stumble. Humans may lack raw strength, Claire said calmly, though her breathing was elevated from the exertion. But we've spent thousands of years developing fighting systems that don't rely on power. Leverage, timing, and understanding how bodies move matters more than muscle mass. The fight continued for another 3 minutes. The drone tried various Throk techniques, but Claire countered each one. She used joint locks, throws, strikes to vulnerable points, and footwork that kept her away from the drone's most powerful attacks. When the first round ended, Claire had taken only one minor hit, a glancing blow to her shoulder that she had rolled with to minimize impact. Zareth stood in the observation gallery, his expression thoughtful. He spoke to the technician controlling the drone. Load the Kresh speedfighting program. Increase drone capacity to 70%. The second round began immediately. The Kresh were known for their incredible speed, using rapid-fire attacks to overwhelm slower opponents. The drone became a blur of motion, its strikes coming from multiple angles in quick succession. This was a style that should have been perfect for defeating a human with their supposedly slow reaction times. But Claire adapted. She couldn't match the drone's speed, but she didn't need to. She read the patterns in its attacks and positioned herself to minimize exposure. She blocked what she needed to block and evaded what she couldn't block. Then she waited for an opening. When the drone overextended on a particularly aggressive combination, Claire countered with a strike to its optical sensor that temporarily disrupted its vision processing. By the fifth round, the observers had stopped murmuring in surprise. They watched in silence as Claire systematically defeated each new fighting style the drone presented. She took hits, certainly. Her armor showed scorch marks from energy strikes and dents from physical blows. But she never went down. She never quit, and most impressively, she was learning from each exchange, adapting her tactics to counter new techniques. Kixtal called for a halt to the combat simulation. Claire stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard but still upright. Her protective armor had absorbed most of the damage, but she would definitely have bruises tomorrow. She gave a small wave to the observation gallery. "This proves nothing conclusive," Kixtal announced to the gathered observers. The drone was operating at reduced capacity to prevent lethal injury. "We cannot accurately assess human combat capability without seeing how they respond to actual injury and pain." Claire pulled off her helmet and looked up at the gallery. "I can keep going if you want. Increase the drone's power output. I'll sign a waiver releasing the council from liability if I get hurt." Zareth raised a hand to silence the rising objections from other council members. "That will not be necessary, Lieutenant Mason. Instead, I propose we take a different approach. Before we continue any physical testing, I suggest we examine Earth's historical records more carefully. I believe we may be operating under significant misconceptions about your species." An emergency session of the evaluation committee was convened that evening. A team of xenobiologists and anthropologists were assigned to review Earth's submitted data with greater scrutiny. What they had initially dismissed as primitive barbarism now demanded closer examination in light of what they had witnessed. The lead researcher, a methodical being named Plexon, began compiling a report. He started with Earth's environmental conditions, and his concern grew with each new piece of information. The planet experienced weather patterns that would be classified as catastrophic disasters on most civilized worlds. Yet humans simply called it storm season and went about their lives. Then came the medical data. Humans had an extraordinary healing capacity for a species without regenerative abilities. Their bones could break and mend stronger than before. Their skin could be damaged and repair itself. Their immune systems fought off infections that would kill most galactic species within hours. But it was the military history that truly alarmed Plexon. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire recorded civilization. They had developed weapons of such terrible power that they could destroy their own planet several times over. And despite this, they had somehow avoided self-extinction through a combination of luck, diplomacy, and what the humans called mutually assured destruction. Plexon read accounts of human soldiers continuing to fight with injuries that should have incapacitated them. He found records of humans surviving in environments that were listed as uninhabitable in galactic databases. He discovered that humans had a cultural concept they called never give up that seemed to override their survival instincts. As dawn broke over Zenith Prime Station, Plexon finished his report. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared to present his findings to the council. The conclusion was unavoidable and frankly terrifying. Humanity was not a weak species that had somehow stumbled into space travel. They were survivors who had clawed their way up from a death world and learned to thrive in conditions that would break most other beings. The emergency council session was scheduled for mid-morning. Every major council member made arrangements to attend either in person or via holographic link. The evaluation of humanity had become the most talked-about topic on the station. Some council members were excited about the potential new allies. Others were deeply concerned about allowing such a resilient species into their organization. Claire, unaware of the debate her performance had sparked, spent the evening in her assigned quarters. She had a pleasant video call with her family back on Earth, ate a simple meal, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more questions, and more opportunities to show the galaxy what humans were capable of. She was looking forward to it. The emergency council session began exactly on time. The grand chamber was filled to capacity with representatives from 47 different species. The holographic projectors displayed another 100 council members attending remotely from their home systems. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Everyone wanted to hear what the evaluation committee had discovered about humanity. Plexon stood at the central podium, his datapad containing the most comprehensive report he had ever compiled. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, then began his presentation. The lights dimmed and a holographic display activated, showing Earth rotating slowly in space. Honored council members, Plexon began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. 3 days ago, we received a human representative for standard species evaluation. Based on the biological data Earth submitted with their application, we classified them as Category 4, indicating limited physical capability and suitability primarily for research and administrative roles. The hologram shifted to show Claire's biological scan. As you can see, human bone density is low compared to galactic baseline. Muscle fiber efficiency is approximately half the standard. They possess no natural armor, no venomous defenses, no psionic abilities, and no enhanced healing capabilities. By every objective measure, they appear to be a fragile species. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. This matched what most council members had assumed about humans. Plexon continued. However, direct testing of the human specimen revealed results that contradicted these expectations. She demonstrated pain tolerance far exceeding predicted levels. She functioned in temperature ranges that would disable most species. She operated under gravitational forces that should have crushed her skeletal structure, and she defeated combat simulations designed for species with 3 times her muscle mass. The holographic display now showed clips from Claire's various tests. The council members watched in silence as the human endured what looked like torture without complaint, exercised under crushing gravity, and methodically dismantled a combat drone programmed with advanced fighting techniques. These results prompted a deeper examination of Earth's historical and environmental data, Plexon said. What we discovered requires a complete reassessment of our initial classification. The hologram shifted again, now showing Earth's weather patterns. Massive spiral formations of clouds covered portions of the planet. Earth experiences atmospheric phenomena that we would classify as natural disasters. Hurricanes with wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour occur regularly. Temperature variations across the planet range from -40 degrees to +50 degrees Celsius. The humans do not hide from these conditions. They build structures to withstand them and continue their daily activities. A council member from the Valorian cluster interrupted. Surely they must shelter in protected cities during these events. Plexon shook his head. Historical records show humans often going outside during severe weather for recreation. They have activities called skiing, surfing, and storm watching that involve deliberately exposing themselves to dangerous conditions for enjoyment. The chamber erupted in confused discussion. Plexon waited for silence before continuing. The planet itself is geologically unstable. Tectonic plate movements cause regular earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Humans have built cities directly on fault lines and in volcanic zones. When disasters occur, they rebuild in the same locations. More images appeared showing human cities rising from ruins, infrastructure being restored after floods, and communities recovering from fires. This species does not retreat from adversity. They adapt and overcome it. Plexon took a breath before moving to the next section of his report. Now I must address Earth's medical and biological data. Humans possess a healing capacity that is remarkable for a species without regenerative abilities. Their bones, when broken, heal stronger than they were before the injury. This is a deliberate evolutionary adaptation. Their bodies expect damage and have developed systems to repair it efficiently. The hologram showed microscopic images of human tissue repair processes. Human immune systems are aggressive and highly effective. They fight off pathogens using a combination of adaptive and innate responses. We found records of humans surviving diseases that would have fatal infection rates for most galactic species. A Krellian council member spoke up. Are you suggesting humans are naturally immune to most diseases? Not immune, Plexon corrected, but highly resistant. And when they do fall ill, their bodies mount a fierce defense. Fever responses that would cause brain damage in other species are routine for humans. Their immune cells literally consume invading organisms. It is quite aggressive. The researcher paused, knowing the next section of his report would be the most controversial. Finally, we must discuss human psychology and military history. This species has been in a state of continuous armed conflict for their entire recorded civilization. The hologram now displayed a timeline of human wars, stretching back thousands of years. The sheer number of conflicts made the display almost solid with markers. They have fought wars over resources, territory, ideology, religion, and sometimes for reasons that seem incomprehensible to us. They have developed over 17,000 distinct methods of combat. Images of various weapons filled the display. From primitive stone tools to advanced nuclear warheads, humans created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They built enough of these weapons to end their civilization multiple times over, and yet they have not used them to extinction. They developed diplomatic systems and treaties specifically to prevent their own self-destruction. Plexon's voice grew more serious. But what concerns me most is the human psychological trait they call determination. We have found countless records of individual humans continuing to function long past the point where their bodies should have shut down, soldiers fighting with fatal injuries, explorers surviving in impossible conditions, scientists enduring years of hardship for their research. The hologram showed historical images, a human climbing a mountain in a blizzard, another crawling through a desert with a broken leg, a third floating in the ocean for days after a shipwreck. This species has a cultural value that can best be translated as refusing to give up. They teach it to their children. They celebrate it in their stories. They build their entire society around the concept that determination can overcome any obstacle. The chamber was completely silent now. Every council member was focused on the presentation, understanding the implications of what they were hearing. Based on this comprehensive analysis, Plexon concluded, I am recommending an immediate reclassification of humanity from Category 4 to Category 1. They are an apex survival species. Their physical parameters are deceptive because they have evolved strategies that do not rely on raw physical power. They are persistence hunters who use endurance and determination to outlast stronger prey. They are environmental generalists who can adapt to almost any conditions. And they are warriors who have survived countless conflicts through tactical innovation and sheer stubbornness. Plexon paused, letting his words sink in. We made a fundamental error in our initial assessment. We judged humans by the standards we used for species that evolved on stable, peaceful worlds. But Earth is not a stable, peaceful world. It is a high-gravity planet with extreme weather, geological instability, and an ecosystem filled with dangerous organisms. Humans did not just survive these conditions. They thrived in them. They spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment from frozen poles to scorching deserts. The head of the council, Administrator Krelvan, spoke for the first time. What do you recommend regarding their application for membership? Immediate approval, Plexon said without hesitation. Furthermore, I recommend we assign them to roles we currently consider too dangerous for most species. Hazardous world colonization, deep space exploration, crisis response in extreme environments. Humans are uniquely qualified for tasks that we have struggled to fill because most species cannot tolerate the conditions. Zareth stood from his seat. I second this recommendation. I observed the human's combat performance personally. She did not just survive the simulation. She analyzed it, adapted to it, and defeated it using techniques our combat instructors had never seen before. If one average human can perform at this level, imagine what their trained specialist could accomplish. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members were excited about the possibilities. Others expressed concern about allowing such a resilient species into their organization. What if humans decided to become aggressive? What if their warrior culture made them dangerous allies? But the vote, when it came, was nearly unanimous. Humanity would be welcomed into the Galactic Council with full membership status and immediate assignment to critical roles in hazardous environment operations. 3 months after humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council, Claire Mason found herself back in space, but this time leading a proper expedition rather than serving as a test subject. The mission was to survey and establish preliminary infrastructure on Karak-7, a mineral-rich planet that had defeated 3 previous colonization attempts. The world was classified as extreme hazard due to its intense gravity, toxic atmospheric components, unpredictable seismic activity, and aggressive native wildlife. The expedition team was small but diverse. Besides Claire, there were 2 other humans. Jake Porter was a geologist with military engineering background. Lisa Grant was a xenobiologist who specialized in hostile ecosystem adaptation. The rest of the team consisted of 6 Krellian warriors who had volunteered specifically to observe humans working in field conditions. The Krellian squad leader was named Gorthax. He was a decorated veteran with 30 years of military service and absolutely no faith in humanity's council membership. He believed humans had been accepted for political reasons rather than merit, and he had requested this assignment to prove they were unsuitable for hazardous operations. He expected the humans to fail, require rescue, and provide evidence for his report recommending their reclassification. The expedition ship entered orbit around Karak 7 on schedule. The planet looked menacing even from space. Dark clouds swirled across rust-colored continents. Electrical storms lit up the night side with constant lightning. Volcanic activity glowed in several regions like infected wounds on the planetary surface. Scans confirm previous reports, Jake announced from his station. Gravity is 1.8 times galactic standard. Atmosphere is breathable but contains sulfur compounds that will irritate most species. Surface temperature averages 38 degrees Celsius with spikes up to 50 during solar exposure. Seismic sensors detect constant microtremors with major events occurring approximately every 15 hours. Gorthax studied the data with his typical thoroughness. This world should not be colonized. The risk to personnel is unacceptable. The mineral deposits are worth the risk, Claire replied calmly, and the Council needs these resources for the deep space infrastructure projects. We're not here to live permanently. We're here to establish automated mining operations that can function in these conditions. The Krellian warrior made a sound that his translator rendered as skeptical agreement. Then let us begin. I want to complete this mission quickly and return to civilized space. The landing was rough. Atmospheric turbulence shook the ship violently as they descended through the cloud layers. One of the Krellian warriors became sick from the motion, which Gorthax noted with embarrassment. The humans seemed unbothered by the rough ride, casually discussing dinner plans while being thrown around in their safety harnesses. Surface conditions were exactly as harsh as predicted. The gravity made every movement require extra effort. The air smelled like rotten eggs from the sulfur compounds. The heat was oppressive, and everyone except the humans activated their suit cooling systems immediately. Claire, Jake, and Lisa simply drank extra water and moved a bit slower to conserve energy. The first 2 days of the expedition went smoothly. They established a base camp in a relatively stable area and began preliminary surveys. The Krellian warriors were impressed despite themselves. The humans worked longer hours than anyone else, complaining less about the conditions, and actually seemed to enjoy the challenge of the environment. On the 3rd day, disaster struck. Jake was doing a geological survey in a canyon system when sensors detected an incoming seismic event. A major one, larger than anything recorded in the previous reports. The team had approximately 4 minutes to reach the ship before the quake hit. Everyone ran for the landing site. The Krellian warriors, with their superior strength and speed, reached safety first. Jake and Lisa arrived moments later, but Claire was delayed because she had stopped to secure critical survey equipment that would have been destroyed in the quake. Leave it and run, Gorthax commanded over the radio. 30 seconds, Claire replied, her voice strained from exertion. She was sprinting through the canyon, carrying equipment that weighed nearly as much as she did, in gravity almost twice what her body was designed for. She didn't make it. The earthquake hit while she was still 500 meters from the ship. The canyon wall shook violently and began to collapse. Massive boulders fell from above. A particularly large section of the cliff face broke free and tumbled directly toward the running human. Claire saw it coming and dove to the side, but she wasn't fast enough. The boulder clipped her legs and sent her tumbling. She rolled with the impact, protecting the equipment and her head, but she ended up pinned under a rock that would have crushed most beings flat. "Claire!" Lisa shouted over the radio. "Claire, respond." There was silence for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then Claire's voice came through, tight with pain but alive. "I'm okay." "Well, I'm not okay. I'm trapped, but I'm conscious and my suit hasn't breached." Gorthax assessed the situation quickly. The canyon was still collapsing. Aftershocks would continue for hours. Attempting a rescue in these conditions would be extremely dangerous. The logical decision was to wait for the seismic activity to subside, then recover the body and whatever equipment survived. but Jake and Lisa were already suiting up in heavy rescue gear. "We're coming to get you," Jake said simply. "Negative," Gorthax ordered. "The canyon is unstable. You will wait for conditions to improve." The two humans looked at the Krellian squad leader with expressions he had learned to recognize as polite defiance. "With respect, sir," Lisa said. "That's not how we do things. Claire would come for us and we're going for her. You can either help or stay here, but we're going either way." Gorthax felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Respect, perhaps, or shame. He had led warriors for decades, but he had never seen such immediate, unquestioning loyalty to a teammate. "Very well," he said. "We will all go, but we do this intelligently. Porter, you carry the emergency jack. Grant, bring the thermal cutting lance. I will handle the medical kit and portable shield generator." The rescue team moved into the canyon with Gorthax using his superior strength to clear a path through the rubble. The aftershocks continued, making every step dangerous. Twice they had to take cover as fresh debris fell from above. But they pressed forward because that was what Claire had done for the mission, and now the mission was to save her. They found her trapped under a boulder roughly 2 meters across. She was lying on her side, both legs pinned from mid-thigh down. Her suit was damaged but not breached, and she was conscious, which was more than Gorthax had expected. "Took you long enough," Claire said with a weak smile. "I was starting to think you forgot about me." "How bad is the pain?" Lisa asked, already scanning Claire's injuries with medical equipment. "On a scale of 1 to 10, about a 7, Claire replied. "Both legs are definitely broken. Maybe some internal injuries. But I've had worse during training accidents. Well, once during a training accident. This is definitely in my top 3 worst injuries." Gorthax positioned the shield generator to protect them from falling debris, while Jake and Lisa worked to free Claire. The boulder was too heavy to lift even for the Krellian's strength. They had to use the emergency jack to raise it incrementally, while cutting away smaller rocks with the thermal lance. During the 30-minute rescue operation, Claire remained conscious and even tried to help by directing their efforts. She explained where to place the jack for optimal leverage, and suggested using explosive charges from the survey kit to break up some of the surrounding rock. When a particularly large aftershock hit and everyone else ducked for cover, she stayed calm and reminded them to secure the jack first, so their progress wasn't lost. Finally, they freed her legs. The damage was severe. Both tibias fractured, extensive soft tissue trauma, and probable internal bleeding. Lisa administered emergency medicine and stabilized Claire for transport. Jake and Gorthax improvised a stretcher from equipment cases. The journey back to the ship took twice as long as the approach because they had to carry Claire carefully through unstable terrain. More aftershocks hit during the return trip. At one point, a fresh collapse blocked their path and they had to find an alternate route. But they kept moving, kept working together, kept refusing to leave anyone behind. When they finally reached the ship, Claire had been trapped for over 2 hours. She was pale from blood loss and pain medication, but still conscious. As they loaded her into the medical bay, she grabbed Gorthax's arm with surprising strength. "Thank you," she said, "for coming back for me. You didn't have to do that." The Krellian warrior looked at the injured human and felt his certainty crumble. He had come on this mission to prove humans were weak and unsuitable for hazardous operations. Instead, he had witnessed a human risk her life to save equipment, survive injuries that would have killed many beings, and remain composed and helpful during her own rescue. "Lieutenant Mason," Gorthax said formally, "I owe you an apology. I believed your species was given council membership without merit. I was wrong." Claire smiled through the pain. "We are weak compared to most of you. Our bones break easier. Our muscles tire faster. We can't take as much damage without failing.